Talking Tennessee football with Charlie Burris from Orange and White, and we're breaking down the wide receivers with Tennessee spring practice about 3 weeks away. Josh Malone, along with a number of wide receivers that have been recruited here in the last 3-4 years under Butch Jones. Some of them disappointed, some of them didn't. Josh Malone finally came through in his last season there in Knoxville with 50 big catches and 11 touchdowns. A number of 4- and 5-star guys, and some of them disappointed, as I mentioned, but Josh Malone coming through. He's now gone. I would say, Charlie, that in regards to watching the big games and the big plays, most of those were made by the returning wide receivers, by Jauan Jennings, that made some memorable catches in some big games, and obviously the Hail Mary against Georgia, and of course some big catches against Florida as well. Kind of size up what's left in the wide receiver core.
Josh Malone was the leading wide receiver, and I was actually just trying to pull that up if I can. So he had last season 972 yards receiving on 50 catches. 19 yards per catch, but Jauan Jennings, who you said he was a true sophomore last year, and he had 580 yards last year on 40 receptions, and of course, a spectacular catch against Florida that it gave Tennessee the lead during the game, and it's kind of become a legendary moment where he burned Jalen Tabor, who is now going on to be a defensive back in the NFL. And then, of course, the infamous Hail Mary at Georgia that ended up not winning Tennessee an SEC championship, as insane as that might be. So he's an incredible talent. Josh Malone was an incredible talent. I think Josh Malone is going to play at the NFL level. At the very least, I think he gets a free agent contract. But that's the majority of your production going out the door. And past that, the third, and this is the craziest thing, and really a problem that I've had with Butch Jones' scheme. Third leading receiver from last year was running back Alvin Kamara, who had 392 yards receiving. So you go from 972 to 580, which is a huge drop already, then all the way down to 392, and then really no production from anybody else. So you basically have coming back Jauan Jennings and Jauan Jennings, like that's who you have coming back. There is also Josh Smith, who's going to be a senior, but currently he's going to have to sit out spring practice because of an injury that's been nagging him. You have a couple of good tight ends in Ethan Wolf and actually his brother Eli Wolf. But then also there's Tyler Bird, who is going to be a sophomore this coming year. He's a true freshman, and Butch Jones had him running end arounds and things this year, and he looks like an incredible athlete, but there's also been talk of moving him to the defensive side of the ball, and that might happen, although they really need him on wide receiver, so that I think he'll probably stay there. And then really, it's just unknown from there on. You had a 5-star player in Preston Williams who left in the middle of the season last year, so you lose potentially a lot of production there, and past that, it's just pretty much completely unknowns. Brandon Johnson, who's going to be a sophomore, 93 yards receiving last year. Jeff George, who is a transfer, 20 yards receiving last year. Marquez Callaway, who will be a sophomore, 13 yards receiving last year. So I have no idea who it's going to be, where they're going to find production past Jauan Jennings. Jauan Jennings, obviously, I would assume is going to be your primary receiver, your slot guy. And rightfully so. He's an incredible talent who can just basically go up and get the ball from anywhere in any way that he wants to. But other than that, it's hard to say exactly what will happen. And then on top of that, they just got a new wide receivers coach in Kevin Beard from Florida International, previously of Miami. Also, he was at Florida International for about 2 months. So you have a new coach, basically an entirely new core of receivers, and it's really hard to say exactly what's going to happen, and a new quarterback. So all of those things combined, I don't know exactly what's going to happen. It's difficult to say. We will see soon enough, though.
Well, Charlie, I've got a collection of names that you know better than I do, but just looking at the commits for 2017, Jordan Murphy, a top 50 wide receiver out of Mississippi. Josh Palmer, who wasn't that highly rated, number 119 at the position out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And you got Jaquez Jones, who was a number 132 wide receiver, according to 247 Sports, out of Clearwater, Florida. So not necessarily highly rated wide receivers compared to what Tennessee is expecting to get, especially under Butch Jones. But who knows? Once they step on campus, forget the rankings and the stars and all that other business. Maybe they play themselves into the mix, especially considering in 3 and 4 wide receiver sets, you need plenty of players to get out there and play. So maybe some of these young kids work themselves into it.
Maybe. And it's tough. This just kind of adding to the whole, it's sort of been a theme through what we're talking about, where Butch Jones is in a year that's really pivotal in terms of his employment. And he didn't have a great recruiting class this year, just comparatively so. Obviously, I believe it finished in, I think on 24/7, it was like number 16. Like, that's, on the whole, that's not bad. Vanderbilt would kill for that. And of course, they beat Tennessee last year, so as sad as that might be. But a relatively good recruiting class. But for Butch Jones, he had 2 top 5 recruiting classes in the last 3 years. And it's just not what fans have come to expect. Yeah, they one 4-star in that whole set of wide receivers that you named off. And I don't know if any of them are instant producers for this team. I don't see it as much. And specifically, it's hard to say who will be an instant producer at all in wide receivers past Jauan Jennings because of the quarterback situation almost more than anything. Do you have a guy who can even get them the ball? Because Josh Dobbs never really was that guy. He relied on their groundwork, and it just kind of was what it was. And now, hopefully, you can rely on your groundwork. It's expected if you use Jarek Guarantano at quarterback, you'll be able to run the ball. But still, everything about this wide receiver core is really up in the air and adds to the fact that I don't know how this year is going to go. Honestly, it could go really well. Some of these guys have potential through the roof. Like a Marquez Callaway. I think a kid like that, he didn't get much playing time, but it was because Tennessee's wide receivers were pretty good in this last year. And then I think he could be good, but will he even have a chance to get the ball? It's hard to say. So hopefully with a new wide receivers coach, a new quarterbacks coach, these things get worked out. New offensive coordinator also. I guess you should address that. Butch Jones got a new offensive coordinator, new wide receivers coach, new quarterbacks coach, new defensive backs coach, a new quality control coach, whatever that means. That's the new hip position in college football these days. And you got all of these new guys, this huge influx of people, a new AD, a new chancellor. And it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. The wide receivers, defensive ends, quarterbacks, running backs, everything's kind of a question mark on this team. So spring practice starts on March 21st, and we'll see what happens then.
Yeah, there's a theme there. New administration, new coaches, new quarterback, new wide receivers, and Butch Jones hopes it stops right there. But it is certainly a key off season for Butch Jones after a number of stellar recruiting classes. As you mentioned, Charlie, this one not quite to the level that the other ones have been, but still you can win a ton of games, even in the SEC with the top 16 recruiting class. But new quarterback, that's never usually not necessarily a stabilizing factor. Usually need the support to help the quarterback situation to help that situation along. Charlie Burris from Orange and White joining us here on Mark Rogers TV for the first time, breaking down some Tennessee football.